Jackie was having an issue with her other computer, so she's connecting with a different computer, so she should be joining us here in a moment. So we'll wait for her.
Jen, you gonna be here?
What's that?
Jen, you gonna be here?
Yeah, she's here. Yep.
Okay,
She's here muted right now, but she's here.
okay.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Jen.
And Jackie is back. Can you hear us now, Jackie?
I'm back. I've got sound. I'm on my old computer.
Okay. All right. I believe the only person we're probably missing would be Mike, and I think he would join us from Arizona, but he hasn't joined yet. So just wait another minute or so, see if Mike's going to join us here real quick, and then if not, we'll go ahead and get started. And, I think I know all the items, the changes to the agenda. I think Emily's been tracking them as well. So. All right, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. I call this regular board meeting of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District to order. The first item of business, the setting of the meeting agenda. So far, I'm aware of 3 changes to the agenda. We will be postponing the salary survey, new business item 6B to the April 8th meeting. We will be dropping the Clean Water Fund grant alum assurance item. There's still some work to be done. We'll be seeing that again on April 8th. And then we'll be adding a Paleo Sediment Core contract. I think we have to do an update. Is that correct, Emily?
Yeah, we've got a recommended amendment to the contract for the monitoring buoys.
Okay, yeah, for the buoys. So let's put that item where the Clean Water Fund grant alum assurance was old business item 7B. Any other changes or additions, removals from the agenda? All right, then a motion to approve the agenda is in order.
I'll make that motion.
All right.
A second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? I will call the roll. Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Smalls,
Aye.
Manager Oknick,
Aye.
Manager Spence, aye. All right. Next item is the consent agenda. Are there any concerns about any items on the consent?
I'd like to
agenda?
pull the regular board meeting from February 11th and February 25th for some additions to the minutes.
Okay, and you'll work with Jessica or Emily to get those.
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
Emily, isn't it?
Is it Emily?
Yeah, either one can take them, but I'll take them.
Okay.
All right, so we have then just items A and B. Any concerns about those items?
I'll make the motion to approve, holding back C and D.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? Call the roll. Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Smalls,
Aye.
Manager Oknick,
Aye.
Manager Spence, aye. All right, public open forum. Is there anyone here who wanted to address the board this evening? Hearing none and seeing nothing in my participants list, I will close the public open forum and move on to the Citizens Advisory Committee update. Jessica.
Mr. President, managers, the CAC once again did not meet this month. However, next month they do plan to do another in-depth review of the watershed management plan. So we will likely have an update from the CAC at that point, as well as a memo to the board, just like last time.
All right. Anything anyone wants to pass along to the CAC through Jessica this evening? All right. All right, let's move on to new business then. Item 6A, the Forest Hills Farm permit.
Mr. President and managers, in front of you, we have permit 20-025 Forest Hills Farm, second edition. The site, Jessica, can you pull up the figure for this? Site's located north of Highway 97 and west of North Shore Trail. So there was a previous development that was, well, thank you, very nice. Previous development that was a little bit west of that. And then this is the second phase. Interesting thing is they had come in and rough graded this, I guess almost 13 years ago. And I think they had bad timing with the recession and it's just kind of sat there for a long time. So it's coming back now. So like I said, the site was previously rough graded and they had even put in a couple holding ponds at that time. The project is on a 27-acre site and will result in 35 single-family home sites. For stormwater management, they're proposing 2 infiltration basins at the locations of those ponds that were previously graded. So in order to do that, they need to come in and kind of dig out the sediment and stuff that's accumulated in those over the years and kind of remediate the soils down to soils that are good for infiltration. And they've taken soil borings at that location, so we know kind of what depth they need to go down to achieve that. This project also triggers the district's buffer rule. We've got couple different wetlands on site. One of those requires a 25-foot buffer and the other one requires a 50-foot buffer, but that's not really applicable here because there's also steep slopes. So they need to pull the buffer up to the top of those steep slopes. So that purple area you see there is actually much wider than 50 feet. In some places it's in excess of 100 feet. So there'll be a nice wide buffer there in between the homes and the wetland areas. And then for erosion control, they have the standard rock construction entrance, silt fence, inlet protection, all that good stuff. So I'm recommending approval with the conditions in the report. Number 1 is I just want a little bit more details on how those basins will be excavated, just so it's clear to the contractor. It's clear to me from the narrative that they provided, but I just think it would help to have a little better details in the plan set. And then the rest of the pending items are just our typical administrative items with maintenance agreements, recordings, and sureties.
Any questions for Greg about the permit?
Just one, is there any excavation going to take place on the slopes? Are they planning to do any kind of rock or brick kind of stepped walls or anything like that?
Yep, there'll be some retaining walls on kind of some of them that are backing up to some steeper slopes there. Definitely not all of them, but yes, some of them will have some stepped kind of retaining walls on the backside.
Okay. And are you looking at those as well? From an engineering standpoint, or what's going on with that?
Well, I haven't specifically asked for, I guess, design details for the retaining walls. I've looked at where those are on the site, and I think it should work out fine. That's not something that our rules really cover, so I don't know that it's in my purview to start reviewing the engineering design of those, but if the board wants us to, we surely could ask for a little bit more detail.
I thought we did have something in our rules on shoreland, in the shoreland area that dealt with retaining walls. Or maybe it's just right on the shoreline.
Right, this wouldn't be considered a shoreland zone per se. You know, this is a buffer area upstream of a wetland. But I'll double check that after the board meeting and make sure
Okay,
there isn't something there that we need to follow up on. But just as a reminder, our shoreland rule doesn't kick in because there isn't that general permit, and maybe Chuck can help me out here because I'm not remembering the exact details of that, but our shoreland rule would not be triggered by this permit.
well, where is this development exactly? There's no address to it, so it's just kind of general.
Right, so it's right at the corner of Highway 97 and North Shore Trail. So I don't know,
Okay.
Jessica, if you could pull up that location map you had again.
Yeah, it's right there.
Oh,
So that yellow highlighted area is where the development is.
so is this part of that development that has a driveway or a street, I mean, coming onto 97, a little bit west of that yellow marking?
Yep, that was the first phase of this.
Okay, so
development.
those are pretty high-end homes right on the lake, is that correct?
Well, none of these will be on the lake. I'm
Okay.
not sure if that first phase maybe had a lot or two down on the lake.
Okay, that's where I
none
was
of the-
getting a little confused. All right. I don't remember seeing this map in our packet, but
This one wasn't there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It's helpful if we can have all the details there, or use our map that has our little micro sections in it, then we can locate it pretty easily. All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Greg? Regarding this
I have one, yeah. Greg, could you explain why those holding ponds have to be dug out?
Sure. So our current rules require volume control. And so those existing holding ponds were not designed with that intention. So they're more for rate control and water quality. And, you know, with a sealed bottom, you know, the water will just kind of go in and out. It'll get treated, but there won't be any volume control. So in order to address the volume requirements, they're converting them into infiltration basins. So we get to actually get infiltration into the ground. That way we'll get volume control and improved treatment.
So when they were originally designed, they were not designed for that purpose, or was it because there's been a lot of fill-in over the 13 years?
I think probably both. I think they probably weren't designed for that original purpose. And then also just, you know, there's probably just been some accumulation of stuff in the basin. So they went infiltrate as well.
Which brings up the question then of what is the maintenance agreement on for those BMPs?
Yep, so we have our standard template, which requires, I believe, annual inspection. And then if the ponds aren't drawing down the way they're supposed to be, then they need to come in and remediate them. So that's all in our standard O&M template for infiltration basins.
Right, I just bring this point up because, as you know, I've been pushing to try to get the watershed district to put into a system to go back and look at our past permitted BMP maintenance agreements to follow up, to see if
Sure.
action has been taken on those. And this is just another example where in 13 years, some fill-in has gone in there to reduce the effectiveness of the BMP. So if we're not doing this on a regular basis, we're going to lose all the good work we've done. So This will be
Yep.
brought up later on in the meeting. I just want to make a point of it right now, since we had a specific example to show kind of what I'm concerned about. Thanks, Greg.
Yep, and I think that's on the district staff's radar to kind of start looking at those, but yep, definitely a good point that, you know, all the people that sign these maintenance agreements, they need to be submitting inspection reports to the district. But yeah, I think there's also at some point, you know, whether it's on a 10 years, after 10 years or whatever the time period the board wants, that the district maybe sends someone out to also check on some of these, especially the larger ones.
Thank you.
I don't think it's really what the district wants. I think it's what engineering principles and guidelines suggest that we do it. So it's not totally just the district's decision.
Yep, we can definitely provide input on it, right? So again, like I said, the inspections are required as part of the maintenance agreement. It's just kind of a matter of how often do you want someone double checking that. But yeah, we definitely can provide some guidance on that.
And I'm just wondering whether this district has a system right now where it collects those inputs and checks whether we're getting inputs each year from all the past BMPs. Is there a system in place to do that, or is that something we still have to develop?
I believe there is. I don't know if Emily or Trey could jump in.
Yeah, I could. Trade is doing the work right now, but there's a system in place and it has been for a few years. And maybe we haven't explained this very well in the past. We do send out a reminder to maintenance declaration holders that you need to submit your annual report. About half of them, as I understand it, are pretty good about sending those inspection reports. Something that's on our radar, you know, once we have the capacity, is actually going out and checking ourselves on those ones, or at least, as Greg suggested, the bigger ones, the higher priority ones. We haven't done our own inspections on them in the past.
Right, I agree with that 80-20 rule, because I'm sure we have hundreds of these, and so we want to pick the 20% that have the potential 80% impact, and that'll make the best use of our time. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Thanks, Emily.
We need to discuss this. You know, we need to have a separate agenda item on this. Because when you're doing a regulatory program, you don't use 80-20. It's a regulatory program. So everybody has to comply. We've had this conversation before, but obviously we need to have it again. And the engineers definitely have to be involved in this process. These are public works and they need to be, the regulations need to be adhered to.
Okay. Any other questions, discussion for Greg or Mike? Mike had mentioned that something about additional docks. Is that, are you aware of that, Greg? Or
I thought this wasn't on the lake.
yeah, that's what I thought too. I'm not
It's
sure.
not, but in that area, they were requesting additional docks, and I think anticipation of this area being developed. The first phase of that development, the majority of the lots are not on the lake, but they have basically a paved trail for carts and such for people to go down and access their boats. So it's a selling item for the development. So I anticipate this will be this access. So that's for sale. Then they say lake access. They're not going to be on the lake, but they will have that via a trail down to a dock system that can handle like one boat per lot or something. Basically a slip that comes with the lot. So
Yeah, and if you look carefully at the drawing that Greg included, there appears to be some sort of a path between the circular outlet A and the old development. So there looks like there is some connection between these two that would allow, like Mike says, a golf cart or something to traverse between these two developments. So I guess now it makes sense why they would be adding more potential dock space, because people could rent these slips and still get access to the lake. So
John, do you want to point that out? Are you talking about that one on the top or on the east,
no,
northeast?
right
area?
there where
Right there?
Jessica's pointing.
Okay.
There's a cul-de-sac in the old
Mhm.
development, and then Greg drew over the top of
Okay.
the path. So it looks like some sort of a path through there is what I thought I saw when I looked at it. So
Yep. Yeah. So that there'll be a path there that connects over to that other cul-de-sac. And then I'm assuming from there they could walk through the neighborhood down to where those dock areas are.
right.
But there's no additional development down on the lake as part of this permit.
Greg, do you know whether this is an independent property ownership, or is it like a homeowners association that controls all the 27 lots?
I'm guessing there's going to be a homeowners association. I don't know that for sure, but I'm assuming that that's how they'll address the maintenance declaration items, is some sort of association. And I'm guessing if they're going to be part of that other docs system, it's going to get probably rolled into with phase one as well, potentially.
Okay.
Mr.
Any
Chair,
other- Yes, Chuck.
just as a matter of the rules themselves and what they require, I wanted to follow up and ask Greg. I think I heard you note earlier that there would be retaining walls within the buffer on the steep slope, or is that not true? You're shaking your head.
That's not correct. They would be on the upstream side of the buffer, so not in the buffer.
Okay. Very good.
Okay. Anything else? All right, so we have a permit in front of us. Does someone want to make a motion to approve the permit?
I'll move to approve permit. I believe it's 20-25,
Right. 20
along with all the requirements that stated within the permit.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? I'll call the roll. Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Major Smalls,
Aye.
Major Oaknick,
Aye.
Major Spence, aye. All right. All right, let's move on to item C, 2020 year in review, annual report and progress report.
Mr. President, managers, I'll let Emily go over those documents as she was principally responsible for developing them.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Mr. President, managers. So you have in front of you kind of our three regular annual reports, sort of stepping down in detail. That year in review summary infographic, we have that first, and that's just the one pager. The annual report required by statute, and then the progress report, which is kind of our own thing. You don't see that level of detail happening in many other organizations. So as of now, there's still a bit of information that's not yet finalized. The water monitoring report, I think we'll do on April 8th. We've got that final data from Met Council and EOR has been reviewing it. And then the audit hasn't been finalized yet. I would expect that's either April 8th or the 22nd. So these were just putting these in front of the board to review. So no recommended motion tonight, but just putting it in front of you. I'll note that we've received a few comments from Manager Schmaltz on the progress report. He'd kind of alluded to it earlier with the inspection of past permitted BMPs. I could speak to that just a little bit more too. That's something that we have been tracking, and it's part of the 10-year plan update. We've got it mentioned in the permitting section of the plan, and we talked about it in the workload analysis with Houston of taking the time to actually do the inspections on them And it sounds like the board will want to discuss that a little bit more in the future too. So that'll definitely be a topic that we revisit and spend more time on.
Great, thank you. I had some other comments, and I think unless you think the board needs to discuss them, Emily, I'll just leave it up to you and Jessica to decide what you do with those suggestions.
So our goal is to get the annual report submitted by the end of April, correct?
Yes, thank you for
So-
noting that.
So this will be coming back to us for our final approval at either the April 8th or the April 22nd meeting then? Okay,
Yeah, as soon as we can finalize, just the monitoring data and the audit are always those numbers that are still like preliminary in the draft report.
right. So our job here is to start reviewing and start sending comments your way and if we have updates and things. we'd like
Yes,
to see.
thanks.
Any questions or comments for Emily this evening from anyone?
Just one other comment. One of my comments had to do with chlorophyll out of one of the tables, so it wasn't really oriented towards the progress report. So I'm just hoping that Megan will pick up that comment. I copied her on the email, and maybe we can address this at a future meeting.
All right, anything else on this topic this evening?
I've got some comments I'll be sending in. They're not major, just a little wordsmithing here and there, but one thing I can just mention now is that the charts on page 13 for the annual report, it's breaking down projects, programs, and administration spends. If we could put the percentages that represents to the whole in each of those little segmented areas, that would be helpful.
Oh, sure, yeah. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's on a couple of other charts, pie charts, but not on that one for some reason.
Right.
But otherwise, I thought it looked pretty good. Like I said, just a few wordsmithing things from me, but those will be coming in the next week.
Okay. All right. Then I think we'll move on to item D under new business, the 2021 Washington County AIS grant agreements.
Mr. President, managers, Garrett is attending the meeting this evening to go over this. Thank you, Garrett.
Garrett?
Right. Hello, Mr. President Managers. So as you're aware, a couple of meetings ago, I believe, we already executed the grant agreement for the watercraft inspection program. Since then, Washington County announced that we were awarded grants for both flowering rush control and curlew pondweed control on Forest Lake as well, for the amount of $6,800 each, which I believe is almost $1,700 more each than last year. So this item is just to authorize the administrator to execute this agreement, or these two agreements rather.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any other discussion on the motion? I will call the roll. Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Smaltz,
Aye.
Manager Oknick,
Aye.
Manager Spence, aye. All right. Next item is the 2021 AIS Prevention and Management Plan.
Yes, Jessica, could you let me share my screen? Perfect. Oh. All right, let's see if I know what I'm doing here. Bear with me. Oh no. Oh, there we go. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yep.
Okay. So I won't go through everything because I'm sure by now this plan is relatively similar to past years, so you know what's going on. I'll just go over the main things and some of the few changes that are coming up for this year. So starting off with Moody Lake, notably, The aeration system will be deactivated, I think, next week. I believe Blaine mentioned in the staff meeting recently that the signs are already floating in open water. So we'll be pulling those in on Moody and Shields and get those put back into storage for the year. We got out several times this year to monitor the oxygen levels, and they were looking really good this year. Last year they were a bit low, but I think just weather conditions, it was sunnier, less snowpack, things like that, that really kept the DO up. So that was good to see. We'll be doing a curly pond treatment again this year. Just as a reminder, last 2 years we've had full lake control. Full lake control, which was great, and we are expecting the same results this year. And then the fish survey, it's the same as last year. I was told that the DNR is planning to go out and survey, but they cannot guarantee that they'll be out there. They seemed a little short-staffed and have a lot of lakes and a short window to perform these surveys. So I was told if they get to it, that they would email me and notify me of that. So I'll update everyone if they are able to get to it. Bone Lake, again, expecting to probably treat curly pondweed. Last year we treated 5.14 acres and had really good control. So that was nice to see. We'll perform another survey for EWM, but don't expect to find very much. Just like last year, there was hardly anything. Notably for the rough fish management, the DNR will be performing a fish survey. It won't include carp, but they'll be doing a gill net to take a look at the walleye, pike, and perch populations. And I believe that will be occurring sometime in June, I was told. As for zebra mussels, we're going to continue with the same program as last year. Staff's going to go out, perform some wading surveys as time allows. Blaine and I were just at the Lake Association meeting on Tuesday night, and I gave everybody a heads up that I'll be sending more flyers out this year, just asking people at the end of the year to take a look at the bottom of their watercrafts, their boat lift, their docks, and just send photos if they find anything that looks suspicious. Last year I did get a couple people that had me come out and take a look. Didn't find anything, but it was nice that people were inspecting their water equipment and just letting us know if they thought they had found something. Water hyacinth, I think it's been eradicated since 2019. Didn't see it last year, so I wouldn't worry about that. And then same as last year, we have funding to support about 500 hours of inspections. All right.
Can we interrupt you as you're going along, or do you want us to wait?
Yep, no, that's fine.
Okay, on Bone Lake, there's nothing mentioned about what the Bone Lake Association is doing as far as treatment. Maybe they still aren't, or maybe they're not still doing that, but they have in the past done their own treatment.
For EWM?
Yes, well, maybe other things too, but we've heard about the EWM, and I thought we're going to start tracking that so that we know all of the activity in this area that was going on, whether we've done it or not. The bulk of it's going to be us, but do we capture any of that information so that we know?
I'm not aware of them treating EWM, at least since I've been here in the last couple of years.
Okay.
I know that last year they wanted to, just because they did receive a grant through the DNR for it. But again, Steve McComas did not find, I think, hardly anything for EWM in the lake, so
Okay.
it wasn't warranted.
Okay,
But I can just verify with them if in the past, before I had gotten here, that they did any sort of
well,
management.
it gives us a better look at, the whole lake and what's being done. The same thing's true, with anything. I think we capture most of what Forest Lake is doing, but
Right.
Comfort Lake is treating EWM as well, so we'll want to capture that.
Sure. Yes, I will reach out. All right. So Little Comfort Lake, we will be getting a canoe, I believe, soon. I think we've found one. Surprisingly, we found one that's in stock. So hopefully move on that soon. And with that, we'll be able to get out on the lake this year and perform just a simple meandering survey for CLP growth within the lake. Depending on the growth and abundance and whatnot, staff will discuss how best to treat it. then we'll go from there. And again, we'll look for zebra mussels volunteer or for the sampler plate.
Garrett,
Yes.
just a question. This has no budget on it. So if the staff is going to be doing the work, if you find curly leaf, for example, are you going to just allocate time and materials?
I believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe it has been found in great abundance in the past, so it would be maybe a hand-pulling event.
Mhm.
So it wouldn't
They had a
require.
There was a big problem with curly leaf in Little Comfort for
Oh.
many years. So it's surprising that it's not there anymore. It might have something to do with maybe farming dissipating in the area too. Who knows?
Okay. So for shields, again, we'll be treating curly leaf pondweed just like Moody Lake. We had full lake control in the last 2 years. Again, I think we're expecting it. It's a smaller lake, so once you treat a certain amount of acres, it just kind of controls everything in the basin. The other notable thing is the rough fish management, and Manager Smoltz had some comments on the report, and I apologize for maybe being a little vague about our plans for this year. This topic was kind of difficult to decide how to move forward with it, just because we had performed 2 removals and we're only able to get 71 fish out, so it's been proving difficult. And then also we were trying to weigh the pros and cons, the pros and cons of doing another in-lake removal. Obviously, we have that expensive alum treatment that we did in the lake, and we would hate to disrupt that sediment. So it's just that risk reward, and is doing one more in-lake removal worth the potential biomass removal gains, something we had to discuss. So I'll start with just kind of the long-term plan, which I mentioned here, is just encouraging bow anglers and just line anglers to visit the lake and help just remove those fish. Just from some of the reports that we have in the past, like the population estimate and the age class report that we have, there's not a lot of recruitment that's happening in this lake, which is a good thing. So any carp, even if it's just a few by bow fishermen or whatever, that's likely going to have long-lasting effects. And especially with the addition of the aerator supporting the panfish population, I suspect that the recruitment success is going to be low moving forward. So that's the long-term thing. And also the district, I think, is working with the city and they have plans to improve that park. So I can envision some signage or some community events where we encourage people to angle for them, because I don't think many people do. And if you've ever caught one on a line, it's actually a lot of fun. So it'd be good to encourage people to do that. But if the board wants to see a more aggressive approach, being an in-lake removal, Dr. Funky and I discussed the other day, some potential options. And I think what we would recommend is that if the board wants to, again, do a more aggressive approach, that it would be one last electrofishing attempt. In 2019, we did a combination of gill nets and electrofishing. The gill nets, I believe, caught 17 fish, and electrofishing got just over 50. 51 fish electrofishing, which was over 780 pounds of biomass. So that was the more effective approach. And again, we couldn't do seine netting in that lake, so that's not an option. So this is basically the only option we have. So discussing with Megan, the big question was, is having a boat in there, driving up the shore, reversing the engine really quick to get the fish, shock them, going to affect or impact that alum treatment. And after taking a look, let's see here if I can share a new screen. Okay. Can everyone see this?
Mhm.
Okay. So I think given where the activity is going to happen, the removal activity, that we would be able to stay away from where the alum treatment was conducted, and it shouldn't be too much of a problem. And I believe Megan agrees with that. Most of the activity is where my cursor is. There is a couple fallen trees here, and we would just continually drive around the lake along the shoreline, come back to this tree and be able to pull out a handful of carp and come back and do it all over again. So at best, we could expect to do this sort of removal again and hope to get another 51 fish. So something to think about. As for timing, it wouldn't be this spring. We would recommend that it would be done late summer, if not fall. First being, we don't want to disrupt the native spawning population in those shallow areas, the bluegill and crappie and whatever else is there. Then second being, Megan mentioned that if it was in the fall and we're kicking up some sediment in these shallower areas, any nutrients in there wouldn't add to like a noxious algae bloom or something during the growing season.
Well, I think that idea about having a carp contest, fishing contest, is a great education engagement for the public idea. I love that idea.
Yeah, Blaine was in on that meeting. He had some really good ideas too about potentially tagging a fish and then, you know, giving a award or some sort of reward for someone who would return the tag to us. So staff definitely has ideas for that long-term management.
And it would be age bracketed too, right? So you're engaging everyone, children and.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone could
Yeah,
fish for 'em.
it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I like that.
What's the cost per head of carp when you electrofish with those 51 carp we took out?
So I spoke with WSB the other day, and it was a short conversation, so I just asked for a really rough estimate of what they think another electrofishing, and what we would tie into that is a population estimate. We already have 2, but they're from different companies, so I think maybe a third one would strengthen what we think is actually in the lake. And I was, just a rough estimate quoted was about $3,500 to come to the lake 3 times and perform that activity.
So if you had a fishing contest that offered $10 for every carp taken out, that would be pretty inexpensive for us. And plus the fact if you tagged one, if they caught any time during the year, so people could keep fishing on other days besides the contest day, you'd have
Right.
people fishing, a lot, offer maybe $300 or $400 for the tag. I like that idea. I agree with Jackie. It's we get a lot of bang for those ideas.
Mhm.
Yep, absolutely.
PR is phenomenal.
And I'm not sure when carp fishing, usually in the rivers, it's better in August when the rivers are down. But I don't know when it would be for the lake. So we have to talk to somebody about that. Because different times of the year are going to be better, I'm sure. When they're on the shorelines and that is what I'm thinking. So.
Yeah, so I guess staff can discuss a little more, and also the board has input too. If they want to see that aggressive approach, we could do electrofishing attempt one last time. But the long-term management, like I said, is the ideas that you were just mentioning. All right. All right, so I'll just move on. Sorry to keep it moving here. All right, so Lake Keewatin. The most notable thing here is that purple loosestrife. So included in the Blue Water Sciences point intercept survey last year, I asked that he add purple loosestrife to that. And we did find an abundance around the perimeter of the lake. And during one of my surveys or visits to the lake, I'm going to consider it a full survey, but along Keewatin Avenue North, I believe, there was evidence of there being purple loosestrife eating beetles. However, I don't know if they extended to all populations around the lake, but they just don't seem to be having much impact as it is a pretty good distribution, again, all the way around the lake. So I, again, was being a little vague here just because one option is that we supplement those beetles with more that we find in a different population and transplant them there. And the other one being, we just go forward with an herbicide treatment. Before going with the latter, I just wanted to see the results of PLM's treatment on Forest Lake. Again, they very graciously just kind of included that treatment for free while doing the flowering rush treatment on Forest Lake. I suspect it's going to have great results. Patrick seemed very confident that the herbicide he used would provide excellent control that we would see for several years, and hopefully the native vegetation will fill in before it has a chance to come back. But that's just something I wanted to see firsthand before, moving forward with that. I did receive a quote for it, so it'd be a couple $1,000s to have it done. But again, just want to see the results. And then last thing I'll note is that again, we have a canoe coming, and we do have a John boat, so we will be able to get out on the lake this year and just do a quick meandering survey for some of these invasive species. All right. Most notable about Forest Lake is that we're going to be changing a couple of our treatments. So with curly leaf pondweed last year, we suspect that, I should preface, okay, we had really good control in Basin 3, but not so great control in 1 and 2. So a meeting was held with the Lake Association, some of their members, Steve McComas, and what we think is that Forest Lake 3, the population there is growing a little bit faster and sooner than the other ones. So the plan for this year is to delineate the third basin first and then come back maybe a week later and perform the same survey for basins 1 and 3, or 1 and 2 rather, sorry. And hopefully that'll give the other 2 basins enough time to grow and catch up, and Steve will be able to catch that in his survey a little better. So that's the plan there. And I also did receive a quote for 2 different herbicides. In the past, we have used Aquasol K, and I was also given the recommendation to get a quote for Diquat, with just concerns about herbicide resistance. I'll have to talk to Steve, just make sure that that herbicide will be just as effective, but I believe it is a little bit cheaper. I'm still getting some of those quotes back, but I'll be bringing a recommendation for an applicator to the board probably next month, or in the next meeting probably. As for EWM, same as last year, district's budget does not contain any funding to treat it. However, we will be having Blue Water Science conduct those surveys. One notable change about the treatment that I was having a discussion with Jerry Grutner about is that they're going to be changing the herbicide they're using to Procelicor, I believe, and maybe Andrew Schmaltz knows about this more than I do, but from what I've seen with Procelicor, it seems to be a very effective herbicide. I was watching a presentation a few days ago about some lakes over in New York, around that area, that were having several year control using this newer herbicide. And I believe that even on the manufacturer's website, that they have a 3-year guarantee for control with this new product. So hopefully with these treated areas this year, we'll see multi-year control, and we won't have to, or the Lake Association, I should say, won't have to, treat every single year. So we'll see. Very exciting. Again, there's some changes to the flowering rush plan. So before I held my meeting with the Lake Association and Steve McComas and Patrick from TLM, I did a little bit of a literature review, and from what I can tell, the district is, basically doing everything right, which is not surprising. Working with, Steve McComas and all of his experience, and Patrick from TLM, a lot of experience there. The only thing that we could think to try, though, that was shown in the literature to be a little more effective is treat earlier in the season. I think normally the district was treating in late July, early August for the first treatment, whereas in the literature, they're saying that mid to late June is the most effective time to treat. That the reason being that the plant is not yet emergent and doesn't have the photosynthetic ability to replenish all those nutrients that are lost through the growing. So if you can hit it while it's young, it depletes all the energy from the roots and hopefully dies. The only problem being though is that it's below the surface, so it makes it much harder to serve it. So what we're going to do is we're going to delineate some areas based off of past years delineations. There's 2 spots, I believe, that we're going to attempt to try this new treatment on, just because year after year we're seeing persistent growth. So, naturally we should expect to see it in these places this year. So we're going to treat those two populations early, and then we'll come back at the regular time frame to do another treatment, and we'll just see how that's going to go. And then the last thing being that I think same as last year, we have the funds to support almost 2,400 hours of inspections. We'll again prioritize access, the Forest 1 access, but next being Forest Lake 3 access and Forest 2 access. That's just based off of the traffic that we've seen at each, just trying to capture as many boats as we can before they get in. And then the last lake.
Say, Garrett, before you leave Forest Lake, just a comment on the Curaleaf Pond. This is going to be a very unusual year, and I think I mentioned to you that we didn't have much snow on the ice in the spring. I mean, in the fall, when it iced up. And then I was out ice fishing last week, and the Curaleaf is already about 2 to 3 feet deep in 15 feet of water, based upon my sonar that I have. So what you're going to see is a lot of rapid growth this year, and probably the lake's going to warm up a lot faster and earlier than it has in the past. So if you try to wait, I know a lot of times they want to wait to see the Curaleaf, but I think you'll be able to find it pretty easily this year. And if you wait too long, we may miss that, water temperature deadline that we have to meet. So I'll pass that on to Jerry also, but you could be assured it's going to be a bad year for vegetation this year for sure, because of the early Curaleaf growth in the fall. And then now with the early ice out, it's out what, 8 or 9 days early. So it's going to go pretty fast.
Yeah, no, that's a good observation, and we suspect that it might be a bad CLP year as well. So I'll just get in touch with Steve, and we'll just monitor water temperatures, and we'll see what his schedule's like. But yeah, maybe getting out there a little earlier to survey might be a good idea. So thank you. And then for Comfort Lake, again, we don't really expect to see a treatment for CLP, just hasn't been in high enough densities as previous years, but we will have Blue Water Science perform delineation again. For EWM, we will do the surveys, but last year was the first year where the Lake Association kind of took the treatment into their own hands, so I do believe they're planning on performing another treatment again this year.
Yeah, I can give you an update on that. The DNR has approved 15 acres to be treated this year. And they are also using Procelicor that you mentioned already. It's more expensive, but it has absolutely no impact to other plants. And there's no wait time to use the lake by fishermen or people recreating, in the water. So it's pretty amazing, and we hope it works as much as the hype says it does.
Absolutely.
It's received the lowest rating from the EPA on herbicide. So it's hopefully safe, like I said. But we're excited about that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the results as well. Like I said, I've seen some presentations on the results, and it seems very promising. I guess the last thing I'll note is that similar to other lake or previous years, again for this lake, we do have the ability to support about 520 hours of watercraft inspections again. So we're looking forward to doing that. And I believe in our new joint powers agreement with Chisago, we'll be splitting those hours kind of in half. Half will be performed by them, half by us. So that's the only major difference there. And then before I wrap it up, I did forget to mention that on Forest Lake, we'll be seeking a couple more zebra mussel sampler plate volunteers. I spoke with Steve McComas, and I need to have another conversation with him. I believe he's been on vacation for a while, so I didn't want to bug him. But he mentioned in a discussion we had that he has an unpublished way of potentially calculating the water clarity improvements from zebra mussels, and I believe that was something that Manager Smolch was interested in a while ago. So we can deploy more samplers on the lake. He might be able to give us kind of a rough idea of what impact they're having. As I believe what Forest 1, we're seeing maybe an unusual water clarity improvement. So more to come on that, but I'll be sending some to the Lake Association distribute here shortly, looking for volunteers. And with that, I believe that is all I have for this. I'll
Any
get back to
questions
Gary.
for Garrett?
I don't know if it's for Garrett necessarily, but it would be interesting to see the year-over-year expenses or expenditures, I mean, for our AIS program. Because at one time it was, I know, close to 300,000, maybe a little over. And this year it's 156.1. I think this chart is capturing everything, the first page. So that's, either that's a sign of success or we're not capturing everything.
Oh, I see.
But I think it's the former.
Yeah.
So it would just be interesting to see that, and maybe we can get that from Emily or from our bookkeeper accountants, just a year over year expenditure chart.
Sure. Was my screen just sharing Shields Lake, or did I share?
Yeah.
Oh, I apologize. I thought I had switched it back. Oh, it's a little embarrassing.
I was going to say something, but I was following along on my other slides. So.
Okay. Well, so I apologize to everyone for that. I did not read the chat.
So you've got the funding sources from each year, and it would be interesting to see, I think, both the projected and the ultimate eventual spend. So it would be nice to track both of those and maybe see what that's been doing over the years. So.
Is
Any
that
other
something
questions?
different, John?
Yep.
Then what are you asking for again?
No, I just look. So what's listed here is what our plan is to spend. What I would be interested in is to see at the end of the year what we actually ended up spending for that year, because it's not always the same. We budget a certain amount, and then depending on how bad or how good the shape the lakes are in, sometimes we don't spend it all. So.
Well, yeah, I think I asked for an expenditure chart year over year. So if it's different than the budget, yeah, that should capture it. I just want to make sure.
Mr. President, managers, I'll note though too, it does say funding sources on that slide, page 3. And it has the CLFLWD portion is 156, and then the grants 77, 78. So that's about 233 in total.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So something that shows us the total expenditures year over year would be great.
Yeah.
We can do that.
It's our biggest program.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions for Garrett? Do we need to take any action this evening? Approve the plan? I guess we do. We have a motion.
I'll make the motion as it's presented.
All right.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? I'll call the roll. Manager Anderson?
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz?
Aye.
Manager Oaknick?
Aye.
Manager Spence? Aye. All right. Let's move on to item A under old business, the Aquatic Invasive Species Treatment Cost Share Program.
I would like to table this topic. John, I want to have a conversation with the staff. This is not what I had had in mind. So If that's okay with the board, I'd like to flesh this out a little bit more.
It is okay with me, but I guess I thought this was what we talked about doing, but that's okay. Go ahead and have your conversation, and then we'll bring it back either on the 8th or the 25th and revisit it.
I thought
Okay.
this is what we had talked about also, so I'm happy to look at some other alternatives, but I think we should carry this one forward as at least one option. And if Jackie has a different approach she wants to develop, we'd be happy to look at that also.
Yep, I agree. I think let's see some options. So
Say, we should also, just while we're making suggestions, the only thing missing from this was an objective or goals. If that's not clear what we're trying to do here, so I think we should, and both of the suggestions, we should have some type of objectives or goals of the program.
sounds good.
Oh, jeez.
All right, so we'll rework this for a future meeting. All right, then let's move on to the added item, the Paleo Sediment Core Contract Award item. So Emily, if you wanted to present the language that we need.
Sure, Mr. President, managers, I can grab that and drop it in the chat too.
Okay.
So basically, just a little update. We had discussed this item back in October when we had the Phase 3 Paleo Sediment Core scope of work and contract in front of the board. There's discussion about how St. Croix Watershed Research Station would do this additional task of not to exceed $7,200 to put the monitoring buoys in Forest Lake. We said, you know, it's really going to be part of the 2021 monitoring plan, and so it was taken off and set aside at that time. But now we're ready to move forward with it, and so we're just recommending a contract amendment to tack on that work for St. Croix Watershed Research Station to do.
Okay. And you have a proposed motion, right? If I remember right from the email.
Yeah, I'm pasting it right now. And then staff and legal counsel will work on that actual amendment and get it all sorted out with the research station.
Okay, so the proposed motion is a motion to authorize the administrator on advice of council to amend the existing agreement to add high-frequency water quality monitoring buoys at a cost not to exceed $7,200. Does someone want to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
All right. Do we have a second?
A second.
All right, motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? I'll call the roll. Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Smalls.
Aye.
Manager Oaknick,
Aye.
Manager Spence, aye. All right. All right, let's move on to item C then, Clean Water Partnership Loan Extension.
Go ahead, Emily, you can take that one as well, please.
Okay, I always want to allow you to speak first if you want. So this one, we've talked about this a little bit in the past. Our Clean Water Partnership loan currently is set to expire this June. We have the option to extend it for a 4th year, this disbursement period. And it's a pretty simple process, PCA staff explained. And even if it doesn't take us the entire rest of the year to spend the remaining loan funds, we can just close out the disbursement period whenever we're ready. And so our balance, I think I had it on there, it's around $200,000 left on the loan. And so I think we could probably spend it between now and June, but also it's a really simple matter to get the extension, and that would give us a little bit more time. We don't have too many big capital projects going in between now and June. We were a little unsure of kind of how the final projected balance would shake out. So that's our recommendation, is just to request that 1-year extension, give us a little bit more time. And if it doesn't take the full year, we can end it early.
I'll make the motion as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? I'll call the roll. Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Smalls,
Aye.
Manager Opening.
Aye. John, I can barely hear you.
Oh, sorry. Must be my mic on this computer. It's not working as well as on my Mac. Maybe I'll talk up a little bit. And Manager Spence, aye. All right. Let's move on to item D, the Lower St. Croix One Watershed, One Plan discussion.
Yeah, I'll just start the intro to this. Before you tonight are two versions of the resolution. One is the short version. So it has maybe some words added, but it doesn't have the addendum, and it doesn't have the final comments from Manager Schmalz that came back after his vacation. And so it's up to the board to decide how to approach this. But the policy committee meeting on Monday was a very high level. And I was able to make some comments on Mike's time, the fact that we're a small organization and we don't have the resources that others might have. I should have said write out capacity money, but I didn't. And so everybody was, I think, they were quiet. And Fran Miron made some comments that seemed to acknowledge that that's an issue and was very cordial about the suggestions that were being made. I put my name in for the subcommittee on outreach education to be on that. And just for, maybe I should give a little bit more background. The step that we're at now is that there are subcommittees and lead people that have been assigned to all of those 10 areas that we talked about at the last meeting. And ours is a placeholder with just our name and to be determined. And apparently there was some uproar about that. I'll let Emily maybe talk about that a little bit more, but that didn't seem to bother the policy committee. And so it was very collegial. And so like I said, we're not going to, at the last meeting, we're not going to make any changes, massive changes at the policy committee level. It's got to happen at those subcommittee levels. So, the board has made I think, a commitment at the last meeting that we should go ahead and find these subject matter experts and put them forward for those subcommittees. So this resolution is just to express through a resolution our dissatisfaction with the work plan that we were given. And it's important for the board to know too, that the work plan that's in development right now is much more detailed than what we received in February. So we're really basically voting on the outline and telling the Lower St. Croix that we don't like your outline. It's not targeted enough, and all of those reasons that we've listed. So my personal feeling is that we don't need to have that addendum or the extra whereases. That we accomplished that, I think, at the meeting, and then also with the short version of the resolution, we're saying what needs to be said at a high level. Now, when this other more detailed plan comes out, and that's, we're not meeting in March, but we'll meet in April, and that is supposed to be all fleshed out. And so these committees, it's very important over the next 2 months, because it'll be 60 days before we meet, that these committees have our voice present, and it can make hopefully some adaptions, to the final product.
Okay. So I guess the question I had was what's the advantage, disadvantage to the longer resolution? The longer resolution seemed to have the necessary extra detail, but it sounded like you were not in favor of the longer resolution necessarily. So what's the pros and cons here?
Well,
I can,
okay.
let me comment some, Jackie, because I think Jackie did an excellent job at the meeting covering a number of points in the addendum. And I think people agreed with those points, especially the first two. And so I think to send this detailed addendum after we covered it with a policy committee, and got agreement, might be kind of rubbing salt in the wound. So I don't think that's one advantage of dropping it. I think that's what Jackie's recommending also.
Mhm.
However, I do think that the addendum, as we made the minor modifications on the first 3 points, is fine, but I think we should actually add the point about the farming practices and the specific numbers in that paragraph as a separate whereas after the first 3 or 4 we had and the first resolution we did when we started this whole program, because it does quantify everything in a very simple way that the policy committee can understand. And I think if we don't have that in there, those numbers aren't there, and everything else is fairly generic in the comments and the principles we're making in the first 3 points. That last whereas, I think, really quantifies all those points into a concise, 1 paragraph statement that if you read it, has some pretty strong impacts of what we've been promoting. And of course, Mike feels this way, I know strongly, because he wrote that separate memo, the last one he wrote on this whole topic after he talked to Jay and a couple of the other people, that this encapsulizes a lot of what Mike feels about, I think, in a very tight manner. Gets the numbers in there, it gets the percentages in there, it says we've had this information since the beginning, and it also says we're not spending taxpayers' money in the best way. So pretty powerful statement. And I'd hate to see us lose that detail and that thought process. So.
Well, and I have to be honest, when I looked at both of these resolutions, I thought that the longer whereas here that's included in the longer version was repeated in item 5 in the amendment addendum. So I kind of thought this whereas should have been in the other proposal or the other resolution, that it looked like it was really intended to be in the shorter resolution to summarize that one specific point. So I was a little surprised. I guess I thought it probably belonged in the shorter resolution, but that was just my opinion when I read it. So does that make sense that we could put that one additional whereas in the shorter resolution and submit it that way?
You can do whatever you
Shorter
want to do.
I'm not sure.
Honestly, I just didn't think that this was appropriate at this time, because the final work plan has not been finalized yet.
Okay.
And so we're putting out information that we don't know is true.
So once we see the final work plan, are we going to get a chance to comment and approve or disapprove of that as well?
Yes.
Okay. So
I don't-
if no?
Yes, but the key for us is to have subject matter experts at each of those subcommittees, each of those 10 sections or divisions, if you will, of the plan.
Right.
And so that's something that we should talk about after this, as part of this Lower St. Croix, is let's get moving on that. I thought we gave approval to the concept at the last meeting, but we should talk about that tonight and give absolute firm direction to our staff on what we want to do there. There's going to be a cost, but we have to contract for these people, not as consultants, but as contracted staff. We want to make sure that it's contracted staff is how they're referenced. But I just think this is too early. We're kind of mixing information that we know from what's been put into the Bowser grant program with what's actually been shared with the policy committee at this point. Now, Angie did make a reference to people looking at the website. Now, I haven't checked that out, but maybe Emily knows. Has Angie posted anything about this more flushed out budget on the Lower St. Croix website? So are they seeing something different than what we are evaluating here with this resolution.
I missed that reference by Angie, but no, the revised work plan hasn't, I'm looking at the website right now. It's not on the website.
Yeah.
The implementation framework is, which has some detail. Maybe that's what she meant.
Well, that's what we voted on at the policy committee meeting. So
Well, my
anyway,
understanding,
just understanding, where the public information is, it's at this level that we had before us in February when we started talking about this resolution.
okay, just a couple comments. I think Angie's comment about having a more flushed out and larger work plan, I think she only referenced the fact that there were 2 new attachments to it to explain the communications program and to explain the ag program in more detail. I don't think you're going to see much of a change in the work plan other than what we've already seen. That's my opinion.
Well,
Secondly, I think that everybody else has sent in their signed resolution, right?
yes,
Right, so this is actually late. So we're actually writing this 2 weeks ago from what information we had then, and I don't think it's going to change very much. And I don't think we should miss the opportunity to actually quantify what the previous 3 points in that resolution were referencing. This actually quantifies it in a point where you can really understand. If you read those 3 points, if you don't have the insight to read between the lines, it's not going to mean very much to you. This is a kind of a layman's statement that actually takes all those principles and puts it in terms that the average policy committee meeting person can understand from a business perspective. So that's why I think it belongs in there as a separate whereas after the first 3 or 4 points that we had.
I did reference this at a top level at the policy committee meeting. We were talking about making sure that the agronomist was a basin-wide focus and not focused on Washington Conservation District or whoever the lead is for that. I think it's Washington Conservation District. So that they're looked at as an employee of the Lower St. Croix collaboration. And every community then, local government unit can own it, because they're going to have to sell it to their citizens and why this is important and why we're involved in it. And so that point went across very well. And then during that discussion, there was a comment, I think Angie again made a comment that they had combined the non-structural BMPs for ag and the structural BMPs for ag. And my comment was, we think that's a good idea because otherwise you're creating conflict between those 2 approaches, and that there are less expensive and more beneficial practices in the non-structural area. So you don't want to create conflict between those 2 approaches. So it was touched on at a very high level, but not this detailed.
I think we need the detail because it actually clearly points out what we're getting ourselves into in terms of how we're going to spend the money, and the fact that we're not spending as much time on the better farming practices as the information that we have dictates that we should be. So I don't know how it's going to hurt us by putting that last where is in there. I think it can only help us in terms of gaining the confidence or gaining the attention of the policy committee, which has been hard to do.
Our letter in January, however, points to the degraded wetlands as being the focus of getting the best bang for the buck and a quicker pace than attacking it through farm practices. Now, the ones that are direct point sources for the St. Croix or along this on the Sunrise is a different story, but the Army Corps report that Chisago County did points, and this is also true of the St. Croix, has a fact sheet on this very topic, that by addressing the degradation of the wetlands that are collecting all of this pollutant from the farm areas, they are a bigger source and need to be addressed faster. So that's the other reason that I don't think this should be in here right now, because we can't be saying 2 things.
I'm not as sure I agree with that statement because I haven't read that myself. I know that the initial
I have the fact sheet. I'll
part
send
that
to
we
you.
get from the St. Croix, I guess if you would send that to me, I'd like to look at it, but I think the initial St. Croix study was clearly pushing very hard for more row crops and less tillage, et cetera, et cetera. And
I'm not denying that, but what I'm saying is that, and that's true, but what happens is that pollutant leaves the farmland and goes into these wetland triggers and then congregates there. And so you have these extremely high flows coming out of these wetland areas. And so that was identified very clearly in both this fact sheet from the St. Croix and also from the Army Corps of Engineers, that it's better to tackle these concentrated areas than spreading out these activities throughout the landscape. And then also these farms that are so far away. Yes, they're big contributors, but they're not going directly into the Sunrise or directly into the St. Croix. They're going into wetlands.
well, again, then we've got a real problem because we only have $40,000 out of the 2.5 million going on wetlands. So it's,
Yeah, well,
we have more than that. Right, 40,000 is on the lake.
if you
We
look
have
at
more on we have more on the wetlands.
Yeah.
That's my
if
mistake.
you look at this budget, though, what it is it's a startup budget. They're getting their operational act together, and they are setting some objectives for implementation. But
Right.
the majority of it is like any startup business. You know, your first year or two is spent just getting your structure together. And you've got some targets that you're focusing on, but you're not nearly at the point of a developed plan.
No,
And
that's
so-
why this statement shows you from an economics aspect as you move into this where you have to put your focus.
But
And
it's
that's why I
talking
think
about
it's so
farms
important
and,
to be in here.
yeah, it's talking about farm practices. It's not talking about wetland practices.
Right.
Not talking about that at all. So
Right.
I have a problem with this. So I'm gonna vote no if this goes in, just so
I
you
think-
know in advance, because I just don't think it's appropriate right now.
Based on the discussion, we kind of have a two-pronged problem here that we need to address, and we have the points covered with the right above it of what the kind of meta approach should be. And if you start putting specifics in here, you're going to start drawing away from the subcommittee's work that they need to do to pick the right projects to do. So I'm sort of with Jackie on this one. I appreciate the what's behind it, but you're saying then we should focus our efforts on the suboptimal farm practices alone, which may not be the right approach. So let's go.
Not alone, John. I'm saying that it requires more than 70% of the problem requires more than 2% effort.
I hear you, but you're gonna get people, if they do anything, they're gonna do something based around suboptimal farm practices instead of focusing on the 4 points that we made right above, which is that fund allocation, the project outcomes, the kind of things that we really want these projects to do, which should drive us back to picking the right kind of projects, right? Whether they be farm practice projects or wetland projects or whatever. I don't want to we're already sort of poisoning the well and saying, look, we don't agree with your approach. It's not going to make any difference. We already know that. And I believe that we have to make a decision tonight because our time is out. We don't have another week or another meeting to go to where we can rework this resolution. So my preference would be to go with the shorter resolution and just be done with it. Just decline to approve the work plan as we've discussed in the past with the clarifications that you've added to the 4 points, and then submit it. I mean, that's my preference. I don't know, Steve.
The deadline
Well,
is tomorrow.
let's call for a vote, and since there's could possibly be a tie here, can we have Mike, who's on the chair, was on the work committee, have a vote also then if it's needed?
Well, I think there'll be possibly 3 votes here. So why don't we just vote on, well, first, let's vote on the shorter resolution. So if someone wants to.
I'll make a motion to forward resolution 210301, the shorter version.
Okay,
That's the version with the minor adjustments to the 3 points, but leaving out the whereas having to do with better farming practices. Is that
That's correct. And the
Okay.
addendum is gone.
I
as
don't
well.
have them in front of me. I just want to be sure I know what I'm voting on. Okay.
yeah, shorter
I'm
one.
sorry, can I jump in? Is it possible to put those on the screens? I'm not convinced I've been following you guys as well as I could.
Well,
Yeah, I'll share my screen.
Yeah.
Thank
Emily
you so
can put 'em
much.
up.
Okay, so I'll
Yeah, I
just
think-
show each
Yeah,
as it is.
focus on the changed one, the changed elements of each one.
And it's
I think we have
freezing.
time to
Okay, here
read
we
this
go.
out loud if we need to.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
just noting there's a motion awaiting a
Yeah.
second.
yes, I will second the motion just to move us along. So we have a motion and a second. And Emily's
Should we have a
putting-
reading of this, John?
I think it's okay if we, because you're familiar with it, Steve's familiar with it, I'm familiar with it. If we just get Jen up to speed here with the,
So we're voting on whether or not to include this paragraph, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Okay,
you should probably read the first 3 points above that because they're very generic.
but
But you
they're
know
the,
what?
they're the
And that's gonna
same in
carry our-
both,
Excuse
right?
me?
They're the same in both,
Right.
right?
But that's why you need a more detailed explanation or support down below to actually be able to communicate from a business perspective to the policy committee.
Well, if it's the right target, it's not the right target. That's my point.
Well, that's still up in the air. We really don't know that. That's your opinion.
Well, I know that from the research that I've read. I know that for a fact.
Well,
I have no doubt about that, John.
I haven't read it, so I'm not convinced yet. So,
Well, and the issue is we're flat out of time because.
well, I know, I'm willing to vote on it. and We can't do anything about it. I'll read the report and then I'll support Jackie or disagree with her. So
Okay.
one way or the other, just so we have a record of it. But, so that's what we're trying to do here, Jen, is either add or leave that thing off, that large paragraph.
thank you. It sounds like I was following just fine. I just had to be sure.
Well, it's nice to see what you're,
Yes.
what you're talking about, so. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, I will call the roll for the shorter version. It's the version without the whereas right now that we're
Correct.
talking about. Okay. Manager Anderson.
Aye.
Manager Smaltz.
No,
Manager Oknick.
Gosh, guys, I'm on the fence. I can see both points and I wish I had a really obvious decision on this.
I hear you.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Was that the time? Did we run out of time?
No,
Our votes
I
have
thought
to
my
be-
phone was off, but it was just silent. So I'm trying to shut it down.
I guess I'm sorry, I'm gonna make it a tie. I default to more information. Generally.
Okay, so I would vote aye, so we do have a tie, 2-2. So then the alternative would be, I guess the question I would have is there any point in voting for the longer version with the amendment, the addendum? There really isn't, right? The real issue here is whether to include this one additional whereas in the resolution.
That's correct.
Okay. So does someone want to make a motion to put that resolution forward?
No, I think that would be a mistake because I think that would not be well received by the policy committee, and we are on a short leash right now. And I don't think we did that extra aggravation of having the addendum.
No, we're not including the addendum,
Oh, I'm
just the
sorry.
whereas paragraph, right?
Right,
Okay, so the same as the short amendment with just the additional whereas about the suboptimal farm practices. So that's resolution number, whatever,
2.
2.
210301. It's the same number, but it's,
Okay, right.
it's the version, the long version.
Right,
It does have the addendum attached, but the addendum will come off if that's part of the motion.
right. I think that's the way to go. And based on your discussion, you and Steve, I agree that we don't want to throw sand in their face by throwing the addendum in, but we're adding the single separate whereas,
Right.
okay? So this is what it would, we would have, what Emily is showing on the screen right now,
Right, without an addendum.
right?
when does
Okay.
this? Okay,
Tomorrow's the deadline, the 60-day deadline.
Okay,
So does someone want to make the motion to move this one forward?
I'll move that.
Okay, do we have a second?
second,
All right, motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? I'll call the roll. Manager Schmaltz. Oh, Manager Anderson, I'm sorry. Gotta get the order right. Manager Anderson.
No,
Manager Schmaltz.
aye,
Manager Oakman.
yes,
Manager Spence. Yes. We
Hmm.
need to get this done. I understand the angst with the whole thing, and I'm really hoping we do not send the wrong message, but we do have to get this submitted, so. They've already made their decision, so. All right, anything else on the Lower St. Croix then this evening? So I think there was a mention of something else to discuss, Jackie?
that was just, if Emily can just give us a little recap about what she's been working on with that grant application and the, good God, the wider, or the more filled out work plan that she's working on inputting. That might be helpful.
Before we move on, and Chuck, correct me if I'm wrong, have we done all of the motions that we need to do? I remember there was kind of 2 that you had suggested, amending and then adopting, or are we good on motions?
Wasn't the motion to accept the resolution without the addendum?
right.
So I think we took care of that.
Yeah, the Mr. Chair, managers, what Emily's referring to is that we left off last meeting having a resolution, a motion to adopt a resolution on the table. So technically, we needed to amend that first and then adopt the amended resolution. But I think the motion as it has come out combined both of those, and I think that's fine.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay,
Thanks, Emily.
so. So yeah, I have been kind of playing a big role in getting that work plan updated. So what went to the policy committee in January was really just basically a first draft. It was 11 pages long, and it started getting some thoughts down, and that was enough for most members of the policy committee. It's not enough for Bowser. We've basically doubled it in size. A lot of the extra content is in the form of attachments. There's 2 attachments, and they really go into more detail. Maybe not as much detail as Comfort Lake Forest Lake would probably have suggested, but definitely more detail on some of the milestones for the outreach specialist and the shared services educator. I'm still working with, it's basically me and Craig Mell going back and forth with Dan Fabian to address Bowser's comments. Some of them are largely surrounding, you got to add more detail. You got to talk about what your process for ranking and prioritizing projects will be. You need to have some measurable milestones and outcomes. One of the conversations I'm kind of looking forward to getting some clarity on from Craig and maybe the rest of the team is what are the proposed load reductions at target water bodies? Because it's basically, 400 pounds for non-structural ag BMPs and kind of very general. It sounds to me in the latest that we've heard from Bowser, they might want even more detail on where those load reductions are going to occur, what those target water bodies are. And so I'm not sure if the group really knows that. They have their priority water bodies in table 5.2 and 5.3 of that comprehensive management plan. So that's still kind of a question mark for me of where that line of detail is going to fall as far as where those load reductions are going to be achieved. I know at a minimum, what we would want reported is at some target water body that's on that list, definitely not just the edge of field reduction. So more to come on that. I think that's kind of it. It's gone through a lot of iterations. And so what we're planning to do is just make sure we've addressed all of Bowser's comments, submit that final one. It's got to be approved by the 28th is the deadline to have the watershed-based grant agreement executed. And then the policy committee will actually meet next in May, I believe it is. They met March 22nd. They're skipping April. They'll meet in May. And at that time, we'll bring them that latest grant work plan.
Any questions for
Can you
everyone?
comment for the board, Emily, on the inclusion of the Comfort Lake, Forest Lake projects in this plan? I saw, I forget what section it's in, but in that detail that you sent out to us, the 2 Comfort Lake Watershed District projects are mentioned in this work plan for the Lower St. Croix. Why is that?
Yeah, so probably the most notable one is in Activity 6, Wetland Restoration Implementation. This one that's the grant for that is just under $40,000. It was kind of that remaining one. They put all the grant funds towards sort of the other items for ag and such. And then, just put kind of the remainder into wetlands. During one of the planning team meetings, they had asked are there any wetland restoration projects? Do partners have any wetland restoration projects on the horizon? Are there any that, might just be ready to go? And so Anoka County had one, Chisago County had one. And we had put forward one that we know is kind of on the horizon. I don't know if it's necessarily in the next 3-year time period, but I kind of also just wanted to provide the level of detail that we had. We've got the estimated load reduction to the target water body. We've got estimated costs. Like, kind of this is the level of detail that we think the group should have. And it was that JD6 wetland restoration project, just as an example. I don't know if that one will necessarily go forward, and certainly $40,000 isn't enough to cover it. So I think they were really more just example projects.
Yeah, it might be a match though. It could be a match for
Yeah, for
the
sure.
project that we're doing. So we want to keep that active if that's the case.
Mhm.
But I didn't understand why they would be there. So that explanation helped a great deal. The other thing about that activity 6 area is the SWCD person from Anoka County is listed as the lead. And so we want to make sure that we don't have someone from Anoka County coming in and trying to direct a project in Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District. So that's why it's important to have people on all these committees so that kind of behavior can be stopped. Okay, thank you. Wasn't there another project as well?
That's good. And I wanted to know that too. So we had mentioned, I think, Forest Lake and Comfort Lake in, I think it was the ag BMP. talking about priority areas for Ag BMP implementation. And so one of the water bodies was lakes that drain to St. Croix tributaries. And so we had put forth both Forest Lake and Comfort Lake drain to the Sunrise River, a St. Croix tributary. One of Bowser's comments was that Comfort Lake actually isn't in table 5.3 in the Lower St. Croix Comprehensive Management Plan. So they made us take that one out, but we still have Forest Lake as kind of one of those priority water bodies.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Emily?
Just as a comment, as far as how we want to move forward on this, I know we want to continue to try to influence them, and as Manager Anderson pointed out, the best way to do that is in the subcommittees. But I think we're in a position to exert a lot of influence here in the short term, because we're responsible for project reporting and what the project reporting formats are going to be. And so what I'm recommending, after having read maybe 2 months ago, I read through all the different grants, requirements, et cetera, that Bowser has. You know, we have them for the LSC. I mean, for one watershed, one plan, we have them for competitive grants, and they're all slightly different. But if I recall correctly, there's a lot in there that we can leverage to get people to move to the 3 points in our resolution that we had, generic points that we had in that resolution. And what I'm recommending is that maybe Emily and I can go through those documents and pull together a format that we could recommend to the policy committee that projects be submitted this way. And what I had in mind was kind of which was the Bowser app that we talked about with Jackie, you know, where you look at a sub-watershed, you do your desktop analysis, you pick out all the projects, you prioritize them, which the software does, and then you have an outlet at the bottom of the sub-watershed where you can do some monitoring after the projects are done, before and afterwards, not diagnostic monitoring, but regular monitoring, and that may have to be paid for separately, but it would confirm, and I think in many cases, Bowser requires some kind of proof that the project is working. Just like we saw on this alum request here now, all of a sudden we've got to jump through hoops to ensure that our alum treatment's going to work. Now, are those kind of requirements going to be required for the one watershed, one plans also? So they're in these documents. We just have to go through, find them, and put them in a very simple format and present it to the policy committee. And if you look at that, it's really logical how it works. And there's a software already to do it. And I think it would be a nice way to kind of herd the squirrels all into the same pen. But you know, I think it's worth the effort to try to put that together here in the next 6 weeks.
They're kind of going through that process right now, as Emily just explained, is that their inputs are not what Bowser wants. And so they're getting or needs. So they're getting pushback from Bowser to include more information. And this app that Steve is talking about is the prioritized, targeted, and measurable application that was created by Bowser, Houston Engineering, and who was the third one? I can't remember the third. It was an agency.
Well, there's 2 or 3 other groups that contributed to it.
Well, there were 3. There's an agency, so it's either MPCA. I think it's MPCA, but it's a pretty slick program, actually. And so if the Lower St. Croix can start using that, maybe they buy the. Is there an expense for this, Emily, or all the apps from Bowser free?
I don't know.
They're free.
Okay.
I do. I talked to Doug. They're free and they're available if you
Okay,
want to use
good.
them.
So by using this application, you get a project outline that's much more detailed, as Emily was mentioning, where she's trying to introduce some of ours to the group so that they understand how detailed they have to be. And using a consistent application would make things a lot easier. So you can't, you don't have to spend so much time going back and getting more and more information from people. And then the other thing that's going to be used, and this is part of the plan, is to use that matrix that was created during the planning period, and it's part of the Lower St. Croix Comprehensive Plan. And that is a rating system to help take the subjectivity out of reviewing applications. So it's a combination of those two things that would work the best, I think.
Okay,
I could-
anything else on the Lower St. Croix? Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I could maybe just note too that my role in the administration activity for the work plan is really, it's the progress reporting. So it would occur post-project. It'd be, once the project's implemented, it's up to me to convey to Bowser what was accomplished. Anything like pre-project, picking which projects are going to go forward, that's going to fall to these subcommittees. And so having, like we talked about, having people on those subcommittees will be important.
Well, Steve, if you want to put that together, a proposal to use that application, and whatever you need to do for help with either Doug or Emily's help, I think that would be important to provide that to the group as a tool, a consistent tool.
Yeah, I think, and Emily's probably right. We're supposed to set up a format for reporting, but what I had in mind was your reporting format should provide a big picture of what's actually happened. You just can't come in with 15 projects spread across 3 watersheds and expect, to get credit for that. So by saying, here's how we want you to report it, which is, by the way, how you probably should do your project, right? If you follow this format, it's going to be very clear, and the cream is going to rise to the top. So there's no question about which projects are the best ones. It just makes it so much simpler. And I think the policy committee would, and I'll send this around to everybody. I mean, you've seen it too, Jackie, but I think if we add some other, and we also reference some other points that are in Bowser documents, we're using Bowser information, and I can't understand why Bowser doesn't want to push this harder. And I think I talked to Doug about this, and his opinion was that they just want to get the money out. So they're not worried about this first effort. They just, in the next 2 years, they want to have everybody spending money across a spectrum. And if it's not optimized, they're not too concerned about that right now. That'll be the second issue, where they'll start tightening the screws and trying to get the money better utilized and getting people trained, is what I see happening. But in the meantime, they don't want to introduce too much stress on these people, because they're not going to get anywhere. They're just going to stall out.
Yeah, I made that comment before as well, because that's the information that I had gotten directly from Bowser folks over the last few years. They're getting pressure from the legislature
Right.
because there's not enough activity going on. And so they need more activity to report to the legislature to say, this is what we're doing.
But if you take the Bowser app that's designed for the One Watershed, One Plan, you take their requirements in terms of performance requirements and reporting requirements, which may include some monitoring, by the way, from what I recall reading that for sure, especially on capital projects. They want to make sure the project's working. We're seeing that now even more in more detail on the alum treatment we want to do. We got to jump through all kinds of hoops right now to make sure that this alum treatment works. So that's got to be somewhere in their documents for conforming to the grant performance requirements. So let me put something together, and if I need some help from Emily, I'll ask for it. But I've got the documents here. I've just got to go through them, and it's not a lot of work either. I mean, they're not like they're 60 pages long. They're pretty short. You just got to pull out the tidbits that we want to use.
Okay. Anything else tonight on the Lower St. Croix issue?
Not for me.
Okay. I think we may have to move forward with proposing a separate meeting once a month just to talk about the Lower St. Croix. We're not getting any watershed district work done here.
Yep.
And I just one more request, Jackie, could you please send me that Corps Engineers charts or reports? Because I never really did look at those very closely. I can't recall seeing them. And I'd like to take a look.
I sent it to you probably a year and a half ago when we were part of the planning process, but I'll do it again. And then also the Lower St. Croix reports on the same thing. They're
Right, I appreciate that. And if I've if you're saying, if what you're saying is correct, then we may have to adjust a little bit here as we move into the details as we move forward. So
Well, it is
just wanna make
correct.
sure I can agree with what you're seeing there, because I haven't looked at it yet.
Yeah, okay.
All right. All right, let's move on to the reports of staff. Administrator, Mike.
Mr. President, managers, we're trying to continue wrapping up the audit. Has been underway since the early, well, from the early part of the year. But we had the 2 days of the team connected in early March. I will be working with President Spence and Vice President Anderson on the salary survey work and have something prepared for the April 8th meeting. I also anticipate to have a couple offer letters ready for some, based on some interviews that we've conducted recently. So hopefully I'll have some information on that to report to the board here at the next board meeting. Other than that, just available for your questions.
Questions for Mike?
I just have a quick one, and this goes back to the reporting that we looked at earlier. I forgot to mention that, but it'll be in my comments to Emily. The permitting, when we're reviewing our permitting for the year, the number of permits, I think we're at 44, if I'm not mistaken. But we had hours of inspections that far outweighed, that number. So you would be doing, just an incredible amount of inspections for that many permits. So I think on developments, we're not capturing the individual homes. And so do we go to those individual homes to do inspections or not?
We do.
Okay, I thought so. So I think just to make that clearer, if you want to take this comment tonight and start looking at that, we need to make that clear because everything's out of whack with the number of inspection hours. Okay, that's it.
Just to comment on that point, though, if I remember reading correctly in the permitting area, we had 44 new permits this year. I think it was 44. Don't we have a lot of outstanding permits from last year that are still active? So we may have 150 permits that are actually active, consuming inspection time. So that's why if you compare all the inspections to just the new ones that come in each year, you're going to get a lopsided number. That looks like we're, spending hours out there.
Mhm.
Mike,
Well-
is that correct or not? Or
This was the chart I'm thinking about had both of those numbers. It was the 44 permits this year plus the number of inspection hours, and it was out of whack.
Maybe I'll just jump in. It's a little bit of both. What Steve said of there's a lot of active permits throughout the year because it was like 44 applications, 48 applications, I think 28 in 2020. But that's the other thing is one permit, Chestnut Creek, has dozens of homes, and I bet you Jason is counting each home as an inspection. I think I can add some clarifying text about that of one permit might
yeah.
have a lot of inspections.
Yeah, it's something to look at. It just seemed out of balance to me.
Okay. Any other comments for Mike or questions? All right. Thanks, Mike. All right. EOR.
Mr. President, managers. First of all, this is the new headset. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So one of the biggest things we've been working on over the last couple of weeks is getting all the monitoring equipment installed for stream monitoring. So all the loggers for the Forest Lake diagnostic monitoring are in the field and the long-term stream ISCO units. There was a rain event this week, as you all probably noticed. So we were out yesterday doing the streams and then the ISCO units today. Blaine was also out on behalf of the district collecting samples. So we have our first rain event, and then there's just a handful of loggers that will install for the Broadway Avenue Basin and Shields Lake reuse system next week, as well as one additional ISCO unit in the Forest Lake direct drainage area. So that's going along well. There's a couple just small, as you'll see in the engineer's report, concept designs. There's a project Upland Wetland Restoration District has been investigating near Fourth Lake. One correction, the Forest Hills 15th Green concept designs, the meeting with the golf course was delayed, so I indicated we had presented that to them, but that will actually occur in the latter half of April. And then just so board managers are aware, I will be working with district staff to get the comfort diagnostic report loaded to the April 8th board packet tomorrow so that you have a full 2 weeks to review it, given that it's a very large report and the managers have been reviewing a lot of reports lately. So we wanted to give you 1 week than we typically do. So, and I actually failed to clarify exactly how that will happen with district staff, but I imagine Emily or Jessica will send out an email just notifying that it's posted.
Okay. Questions for Megan?
This is just maybe more for Mike, but on the Sunrise River Drained Wetland Restoration Project, has there been any movement on getting a realtor involved and contacting the landowner where the deaths occurred?
No, my apologies. I have not been able to execute that, but it does bring up a clarification. The board had talked about doing an RFP. Did we want that for services for design kind of work or also for the realtor piece as well?
That was, I think, just for design in my mind, because we had local realtors that we could look at.
I agree with Jackie's recollection. I think it was just for the design services.
Yeah.
Okay, I can get moving on that. Mhm. I have the information. Thank you, Manager Hanson.
Okay.
Any other questions for Megan? Thank you, Megan. All right. Smith Partners, Chuck, anything from you?
Nothing to report, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any questions for Chuck? All right. Reported treasurer, Steve.
Yes, we had income for this month of $21,589.96. And the expenses to be paid this month are $218,367.67. And I'll ask the board for a motion to pay for the expenses this month.
I'll make a motion to pay the bills and accept the treasurer's report.
I'll second.
Seconded. Any other discussion? Call the roll. Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Smalls,
Aye.
Manager Oakney,
Aye.
Manager Spence. Aye. All right. Report of officers and managers. Manager Oakney, anything to report this evening?
No, it's just good to see everybody.
All right. Manager Smalls, anything to report?
Just a comment that I forgot to make. When I looked at the resolution that you showed, at least on my copy, the whereas statement still showed on mine that half of an agronomist time was listed, and it should be 80%. So I don't know whether I've got an old version or whether the current one that we approved is incorrect. So I'm asking Emily to check to make sure that says 80% and not half of an agronomist in the third line down.
I can get that fixed.
Okay.
Okay, no other comments. Thank you.
Manager Anderson.
Looks like we're going to have an early ice out on Comfort Lake this year. That's about it.
Does look that way, doesn't it?
We saw trumpeter swans and mergansers are back now, so
Wow.
life is springing.
Mhm. Looking better out there, yes. And I have nothing to report this evening. So then, summary and approval of board direction.
Mr. President,
Oh, yes.
before we move on, could I just get a read on who will be signing the checks tomorrow? I'm assuming Manager Anderson and Manager Schmaltz will be stopping by in the morning. Is that a correct
Yeah.
assumption?
That's correct. I'll be available.
Yes, I can too as well.
Okay, I'll
We
be
need
there
that
by
reminder,
8:30. So
Jessica. We need that reminder every
Yeah.
month, Jessica. Thank you.
sounds
So I'll
good.
be in after 9 then. Jackie, you're going to be in at 8:30?
Are you in at 8:30, Jessica?
Yes, I will
Okay.
be there. Okay,
Yeah.
that sounds good.
All right.
Okay, Chuck, summary board direction.
Mr. Chair and managers. The board has asked for an agenda item to discuss the district's program to follow up on existing best management practices from permits and their maintenance. Regarding the 2020 year-end review, in general, managers will send comments. Manager Anderson asked that the pie chart on page 13 indicate the percentages of spending. And then Manager Schmaltz also indicated a question regarding chlorophyll that he's communicated to Dr. Funke that he would like to discuss at a future meeting. And that I don't have any more detail on that, but as to the 2021 AIS Prevention and Management Plan, Mr. Miller will look so that staff is aware of what work the lake associations are doing and include that in our informational base. Staff will look at electrofishing and a potential fishing contest for Shields Lake. And the board would like to see year-end annual spending on AIS as well as budgeted amounts for a comparison of years, including this year. And then the regulatory program reporting should be clear about separate lots being inspected, not just developments. And then Manager Schmaltz asked that the whereas in the One Watershed, One Plan resolution be corrected to reflect 80%, not 50% agronomist position.
Okay. I had that Steve was going to pull together and work with staff to pull together some Lower St. Croix tools for reporting and project selection. Does that sound about right, Steve and Jackie?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it.
Sounds right.
Okay. And then Jackie was going to send the Army Corps of Engineers and other reports to Steve.
Correct.
Does anybody else need that? The highlighted portions on the Army Corps is the addendum to the January letter. The highlights where it's talking about the wetlands. So if you want to read the short version for the rest of the board, that's where you find that. But I'll get those to you, Steve.
Sure. If you could, you might as well just send them to Mike and have him send it to the whole board. Then
Okay,
we'll all
Thank
have it.
you.
Okay, anything else that anyone noted? If not, it looks like we're at that magic hour.
I will move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? I will call the roll. Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Oaknick,
Aye.
Manager Spence, aye. We are adjourned. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Take
Good
care.
night.
Right.
Yep, you too.